Hi, I'm Dr. Terri Bly, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist at Ellie Mental Health. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about triggers. You've probably heard the word a million times by now, but what exactly are triggers? Before I can answer that question, I need to spend a little time talking about trauma. Specifically, psychological trauma. Simply put, trauma is a strong emotional response to one or more negative events that cause harm or that threaten to cause harm. Lots of things can be traumatic, from a one-time brush with death to emotionally painful interactions that happen over and over again. And here's the thing, no one gets through life without experiencing some trauma. I mean, let's face it, life can be pretty painful sometimes and scary. What varies from person to person isn't so much whether they experience trauma, but rather how much trauma they experience, as well as the lessons they learn from those experiences. In other words, the way trauma affects you in the long run has everything to do with how your brain comes to understand why those bad things happened to you. Let me give you a quick example to help illustrate what I'm talking about. Let's say I'm a rambunctious 5-year-old girl. My parents take me to the local pool for the first time, and in my unbridled enthusiasm, I head straight for the water and leap right into the deep end, except I don't know how to swim. So there I am, flailing around, swallowing a bunch of water, and I am terrified. That is a traumatic event. Okay, so let's say the lifeguard rescues me. My parents rush over to make sure I'm okay. They give me a big hug and they help me settle down. Then they talk to me about how important it is not to jump into the deep end by myself until I learn to swim. They promise to put me in swimming lessons right away, and in the meantime, they take me over to the shallow end of the pool where they go into the water with me so that we can still have fun and I can feel safe. It's all good. Now instead, imagine the lifeguard rescues me, but this time my parents rush over and they start yelling at me for being so thoughtless and impulsive. They tell me that I ruined a perfectly lovely day at the pool, clearly I'm not cut out to be a swimmer, and we are going home. Same traumatic event, two very different outcomes. And now we are ready to talk about triggers. Okay, so that girl whose parents helped her get back into the water right away, she's probably going to be fine. Who knows? She might even grow up to be a lifeguard. But that other one, the one whose parents got mad at her and took her home, yeah, she's probably going to have some issues. You see, she didn't get a chance to understand why that bad thing happened to her. She didn't almost drown because she was thoughtless or because she was a bad swimmer. She almost drowned because she didn't know how to swim. But her brain doesn't know that, so it's just going to think water has something to do with serious danger and with her being a bad person. So now every time she sees water, her brain is going to go, danger! Also, I suck! And even worse, she's going to feel the same amount of fear and shame she did way back when she was 5. And since no one wants to deal with that if they don't have to, she'll probably just avoid water altogether. Even taking a bath could become off limits, because for her, water is now her trigger. So let me pull it all together. Trauma is when something really bad happens that causes us to have a really big negative emotional reaction. In an ideal scenario, we then get to process the event and learn from it so that we can navigate the world a bit more safely. But sometimes our brains don't get to process the event in a helpful way or even at all. And when that happens, the traumatic event gets stuck in time, and anything associated with that original trauma triggers the same emotional response over and over and over again. In other words, a trigger is what we end up with when we have unprocessed or dysfunctionally processed trauma. But the good news is that your brain knows how to process trauma, even old stuff from when you were a kid. You just might need some help getting there. Fortunately, there are a number of therapies that do just that. So talk with your therapist about how you might address your triggers so that you no longer have to avoid swimming pools or baths, because baths are awesome.